Well, Democrats are proving themselves to be the least Democratic party. And it's really becoming more and more alarming. I think people should really open up their eyes to this, because this really, if you support the Democratic Party, you have to understand what you're supporting here. But they are increasingly the least Democratic party. First, we're going to start off with today. There's been some new reporting. Here's from Politico right here. An article that says Senate Democrats file ethics complaint against Hawley Cruz over election challenge. Says Democrats are requesting an investigation into the pair of senators over their objections to the election results. So goes on to say a group of Senate Democrats filed an ethics complaint Thursday against GOP Senators Josh Hawley and Ted Cruz over their January 6th efforts to object to the 2020 presidential election results. By proceeding with their objections to the electors after the violent attack, Senators Cruz and Hawley lent legitimacy to the mob's cause and made future violence more likely, the senators wrote in a letter to incoming Senate Ethics Panel Chair Chris Coons, Democrat from Delaware, and Vice Chair James Lankford, Republican of Oklahoma. The letter, led by Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, Democrat, Rhode Island, requests that the panel investigate several issues, including whether Cruz from Texas and Hawley from Missouri encouraged the violent January 6th insurrection at the Capitol, whether they coordinated with organizers of the pro-Trump rally immediately before the riot, whether they received donations from any organizations or donors that also funded the rally, and whether the senators engaged in criminal conduct or unethical or improper behavior. Wow. Okay. So now they're saying if you have any connection whatsoever to people that were there, so if you received a donation from somebody and then that person went and donated to some cause at the rally, like the Stop the Steal cause, then you are now complicit in the crimes, and now we're going to potentially remove you from the Senate. This is what Mazie Hirono was on CNN tonight, and she was talking about how their hope is that these two senators are removed from office for inciting what they thought was their role in inciting the violence at the Capitol. A role that, an incitement, by the way, that did not turn out to be the big insurrection that they were claiming it was going to be. There was no other violence that happened yesterday for the inauguration. That didn't happen. They were saying, oh, there's going to be this big insurrection and Donald Trump turned the country against the rest. And this is terrible. And all of it. And really what it was no different than what we saw throughout the summer, which was protests that had gone awry. And some people within the protests who were like paramilitary type people or agent provocateurs, people that were taking advantage of the situation, who did have some pre-planned ideas of doing X, Y, Z. That was going on throughout the summer when people were able to take over areas of cities, or we saw that some of the looting and some of the violence was already pre-planned. That stuff seemed to be set up for these people in order to allow them to do these things, to allow them to go and enact violence. So we know that these types of things happen by people that have that maybe just get off on anarchy and get off on violence, and they just think that stuff is great. And so there's always going to be these agent provocateurs. But to then say, well, now you're complicit because you agreed with the cause. Now, we're not saying and even though maybe we should, to many of the people in Congress and senators who said during the Black Lives Matter protests, saying, well, of course they're rioting. I mean, some of them were saying, and they should, there should be unrest in the cities, and they shouldn't stop, and we shouldn't stop, and their voices need to be heard. And so this is how they're being heard. We saw that all summer long, and yet none of them are being connected to the violence that happened over the summer, where dozens of people were killed. And we're not seeing them being connected to those instances. We're not saying you need to be recalled or kicked out of the Senate or kicked out of the House or kicked out of the vice presidency. Now, Kamala Harris was one that was saying, well, they shouldn't stop. We shouldn't stop, when being directly asked about the violence. So this is hypocrisy right here. And it's anti-democracy for them to say, we want to kick out people. We want to have an ethics committee look them over and kick them out. This just goes along with what I was saying before with the impeachment, going forward with an impeachment of a former president who has no power today, is only an attempt to prevent him from ever running for office again. So again, going against the will of the people which is what they claim Trump did. He lied. This was our democracy. I saw Mazie Hirana going on and on about this on the news saying, well, these were free and fair elections, and he was going against those free and fair elections. How dare he question elections? How dare he raise his voice against elections and wonder if there was something that happened and call for investigations and then claim that they were rigged with no evidence? How dare he? And so therefore he should be stopped. So now you're never going to be able to question elections without being called a conspiracy theorist. Of course, that'll change if a Republican wins. And then the Democrats will claim the election was rigged like they did the last 4 years, saying that Russia did it. And then what? But that'll be okay because hypocrisy is here. And it's been here for a while. So you've got them calling for, Donald Trump to no longer be able to hold public office. They want to now get rid of senators who've been duly elected. On top of that, we saw what the Democratic Party did in 2016 to Bernie Sanders. We saw that they were engaging in unfair, undemocratic behavior by favoring Hillary Clinton, ensuring that Hillary Clinton was the one that was ultimately selected by the people. They did it again to Bernie Sanders in 2020. We saw even more shenanigans going on there. Something very odd happened in Iowa with Pete Buttigieg being able to declare that he had won without really the results being out there. And then we find out that he funded the software and the DNC funded the software. That sounds eerily familiar to the general election. But all of it was fair. All of it was nothing to see here, folks. Nothing to see here, folks, even though Pete Buttigieg was the one oddly then rewarded with a cabinet position in the Democratic Party. If that doesn't make you suspicious, I mean, come on. Are we being honest? So they engage in these non-democratic policies, and they say, don't you dare question elections, which is also undemocratic. They now censor dissent. We've seen this, deplatforming dissent, censoring dissent. They then are the plan that I believe is going to happen, and maybe, of course, there's a chance it won't. But I believe that Joe Biden is going to step aside and Kamala Harris is going to have to go in. And when Kamala Harris is made president, I don't know what they call that, the president at that point, when they have to take over for a former president, for a sitting president. But she'll be installed as president. And then people are asking me, well, Kim, they'll have a primary. And I don't think she'll win the primary. She didn't win the last primary. She didn't even make it to the first election for the primary. She got 3%. 3% of the voters liked Kamala Harris. It was something like outrageously low. And so Kamala Harris is not somebody that we democratically elected. None of us elected her. She didn't make it to she didn't make it through the primary. And then they're going to probably make her president. And surely, even if that doesn't happen, when there won't be a real primary. The primary, they have to hold a primary. Technically, they hold a little bit of a primary, but it will be no contest. They're not going to prop up anybody who's challenging Kamala Harris. They're not going to give those people interviews on their mainstream media. They're not going to do debates. They're not going to give magazine covers or any airtime or any press whatsoever to anyone who primaries Kamala Harris. That is not democracy. We didn't vote for her the first time, and now they're not going to even allow us to not vote for her the second time. They're just going to ensure she gets the nomination the next time. They couldn't ensure it the first time. They tried. The media spent way more time on Kamala Harris than anybody else. They did their darndest to try to get Kamala elected until Tulsi Gabbard took her out, and that was the end of Kamala. But it wasn't. Oh, no, wait, there's another path. Joe Biden. Well, he's old and barely hanging on really with his mind. And so all we could do is just make her the vice president. Sure enough, Joe Biden has to step aside. He will. And Kamala Harris steps in. And then the people will have no choice when it comes to 2024 elections. The people will not choose. We won't get a choice. There will be no primary. It'll be like the guy who challenged Donald Trump, Bill Weld. I don't even know his name. You don't even know his name either because he was insignificant. There was no real challenge. He didn't receive any media airtime. It wasn't a real primary. And that is what's going to happen in 2024. So they're not a Democrat. This is not democracy. Democrats in general, the Democratic Party for sure, but also just the people in the Democratic Party now. I mean, throughout the base, when you spend any time on social media, you see it left and right. The very fascists who sit there saying that they're fighting fascism, yet they themselves have become literal fascists. And they don't even know what that term means. They say, I can't be a fascist. I'm on the left. I'm on the left, so therefore I'm not a fascist. But they don't realize that they've actually moved to the right. and that they are actually engaging in fascism because they want corporate America, namely big tech, to go after the bad guys. So when corporations and politics merge together and go hand in hand, you have fascism. And when the people applaud it and they champion it and they say, do it and go after our political opponents and silence dissent and do all of that in the name of truth and righteousness, you have fascism. And the people are supporting it. In fact, today, a letter came circling around. This was a letter of intent from publishing professionals of the United States saying that they do not want any books by anybody who was in the Trump administration or anybody who supported the Trump administration to receive publishing deals. So they're trying to ban, look at all these people's names that are on this list. These are all publishing professionals, hundreds of names. And they're all saying, yes, we want to ban books. We want to ban books. This is how bad it's gotten. They're wanting to ban books. They're saying, don't you dare even think about publishing a book from anybody who was in the Trump administration. Don't you dare give any of them those millions of dollars that they're for sure going to end up getting, because guess what? Their book will be in demand because the American people want to buy the book and they want to read the book. I want to read Josh Hawley's book. It's about the tyranny of big tech. I want to read that book. But guess what? They won't let me read that book. Why not? Well, because they've decided that Josh Hawley is an enemy of the state because he advocated for what, $2,000 checks for all of us? And he questioned elections, something that Democrats have done every single time a Republican president has won since 2000. Before this, so they did it to George W. Bush. They did it to Trump for sure. And I believe even I think maybe Reagan. I think they might have challenged Reagan as well. So, you know, they're challenging elections, but oh, how dare us? If anybody else challenges elections, then you should be banned. Your books will be banned. You will not get a job. You will be completely blacklisted. We have marched into McCarthyism. And don't be naive. It won't just be the conservatives. It won't just be the Josh Hawleys and the Ted Cruzes of the world, the ones with the R's next to their name. It's going to be the D's too. The people who challenged the election in Iowa saying, what in the world was this with Pete Buttigieg? What was that? What was that all about? The Pete Buttigieg thing and the software that was the counting software for the votes that was seemingly very establishment Democrat. It was funded by the Buttigieg campaign and the DNC. Now we're finding this out. And that was the software that was counting, the proprietary software. Does all of this sound familiar? The proprietary software that was counting the votes. And somehow Pete Buttigieg, the mayor from Fort Wayne, right? Is that where it was? Fort Wayne, Indiana? The mayor of that town, he somehow wins, and now he's rewarded with a cabinet seat. So the Democratic Party has become, and there's many more examples of this, the least Democratic party. Democrats are undemocratic, and they are looking for ways to continue their lack of democracy, to continue marching forward with just their authoritarian ways. They're now an authoritarian party. And look, the Republicans have been no better for a long time. They have their problems, but what I'm seeing right now are the seeds of change in the Republican Party, and I'm really hoping that those seeds of change grow on that side of the aisle, because it's about damn time. They definitely have needed to open their eyes to the fact that the establishment has run amok even in their own party, and that the people don't have control over the Republican Party. And we're going to be going much more in depth regarding the Republican Party as time goes on, because we're hoping for some reform there. And also we just need to call out everybody on the establishment, because it's on both sides of the aisle. They're all complicit. We saw it with Mitch McConnell and Nancy Pelosi warmly giving each other gifts, because guess what? They're on the same team, and it's not our team. And that is something we need to know, that we are on the same team. You and me, we're on the same team. And they're not on our team.